Hello everybody, my name is Linda Kronman and I am a PhD student at the University of Bergen. I am also an artist collaborating together with Andreas Singerle as the artist duo Kairos. Today I'm going to talk about my PhD research and our art practice because they intertwine in our newest artwork Suspicious Behavior. I'm going to start talking about my PhD, in which I investigate how machine vision is represented in digital art. This to situate suspicious behavior among other works that highlight the often invisible human labor that goes into building AI systems. For the second part of this presentation, I took advantage of this being a pre-recorded video and invited Andreas into a conversation with me to describe our online work Suspicious Behavior. So I will start with my PhD that I'm doing as a part of the Machine Vision in Everyday Life project at the University of Bergen. An ongoing part of the project is to build the machine vision database, in which we collect examples of narratives, games, and digital art that represent or simulates machine vision. Because we are interested in how machine vision is represented in cultural artifacts, our definition of machine vision includes a wide range of technologies. What is especially relevant for the suspicious behavior is the artificially intelligent machine vision. So I am talking about narrow AI, and most specifically about the cultural understanding of AI in computer vision. This comprises the use of supervised or semi-supervised machine learning models such as neural networks, and how machines are trained to see objects with collections of labeled images called training sets. These technologies are promoted to be neutral or objective. However, research and art are making us increasingly aware that these technologies are biased, even racist. Those who experience AI discrimination already belong to systematically marginalized and oppressed populations. To shortly mention just a few artists whose artworks are addressing how values and biases get embedded into AI systems through actions of collecting, categorizing, classifying, and cleaning data, I start with Joe Bolomvini's work that is dedicated to demonstrate how AI is intersectionally biased, exposing how facial recognition misrepresents women of color, even failing to detect their faces. A reason that joy is not detected by the coded gaze before she wears a white mask lays in lack of diversity of images in training datasets used to train facial recognition technologies and in benchmark datasets used to measure their performance. In their media archaeological approach, Kate Crawford and Trevor Paglen show how worldviews are hard-coded into machine learning models by looking into classification systems and how images are labeled. In their exhibition Training Humans, they exhibit historical and contemporary training sets and among other things unfold how the normative labeling exclude communities whose identities are not easily categorized, for example mixed race, trans, and bisexual. Max Dowie's and Manetta Barrett's Hits is a performance mimicking the game show genre and brings to our attention the undervalued labor of click workers. In 3 rounds, game show competitors perform human intelligence tasks, hits, to develop an image recognition algorithm. Image annotation for machine learning is typically outsourced using platforms like the Amazon Mechanical Turk. As a part of the Feminist Dataset Art project, Caroline Sinders explores what intersectional feminist machine learning labeling and training systems could be. One outcome is a calculator that translates the numbers of tasks a Turker does and the cost of those tasks into a hourly wage. We consider our artwork's suspicious behavior to be in conversation with these works. Our approach is to explore training datasets that are used to train action detection algorithms to spot suspicious behavior. Therefore, together with Andreas, we use the rest of the time to discuss more in detail how our narrative manifested into a critical video annotation tutorial training click workers to spot suspicious behavior.
Hello, my name is Andreas Zingerle. We work as the Kairos Art Collective. We explore topics such as vulnerabilities in IoT devices, corporatization of city governance in smart cities, and different citizen-sensitive projects in which technology is used to reclaim control of our living environments.
And today we are going to talk about our newest work, Suspicious Behavior. In security and safety context, the surveillance industry is basically focusing on detecting suspicious or anomaly behavior. So what is suspicious behavior? How is it defined? Who is defining it? These are some of the questions our work is looking at.
In this tutorial, the user is trained to complete HITs, human intelligence tasks, in labeling suspicious behavior for an unknown client. Suspicious behavior is a data annotation tutorial for a potential click worker. Click workers or crowd workers are people who do paid microjobs online, such as writing blog posts, virtual assistants, categorizing different types of media. In general, detecting and labeling things that computers are currently unable to perform. The tasks are typically very simple and repetitive, and workers are paid only a few cents to complete them. Amazon's Mechanical Turk allows payments as low as 1 cent for a completed task, which can lead to hourly wages of around $2. As independent contractors, they are also not protected by any fair labor standards. They are compared to the construction workers in the digital world. Their job is to lay one brick after another, but they play an important role in AI development. This human labor is an essential part in the process of automating surveillance. We started to explore the tedious work that people do labeling and preparing data to train AI algorithms. Often the client or the real purpose for labeling the datasets remain unknown, leaving the workers to serve the silicons and other tech giants at a minimum wage.
For the work suspicious behavior, we use different open video benchmark and training datasets. These videos are used to train or test the accuracy of computer vision. In the videos, you see people walking alone, meeting with others, window shopping, entering and exiting shops, fighting and passing out, or leaving a package in a public place. Through these datasets, certain behavior is getting highlighted and enforced. This also raised the question of what behavior is not considered suspicious. A mashup of guidelines from different authorities and security training videos helps the reader of the artwork to spot what is suspicious. What is rather universally considered suspicious behavior is influenced by the threat of terrorist attacks, demonstrations, and uprisings. We can also see how the COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated the development of, for example, training machine vision applications to detect masks. We hope the artwork raises questions of what is considered suspicious behavior in what context. How are we trained to spot what is suspicious, and how are machines now trained to detect this behavior in big amounts of data? What happens when our intuition of what is considered suspicious is translated into machine intuition?
As the work is a hypertext, we also bridge and link to the references that have inspired us. Therefore, the artwork also allows to dig deeper into our research. You can experience the work on our website.
Hi, thank you all for joining us for this artist work-in-progress presentation titled Sensiqwerty, an experimental QWERTY keyboard interface for creative practices and research into sensory-motoric dimensions of human cognition. My name is Alex Lough, and I'm a doctoral candidate at the University of California, Irvine in the Integrated Composition, Improvisation, and Technology program in the Music Department, and I am joined by my colleague and advisor, Simon Penny, who is a professor in the Art Department, also at UCI.
Sensiqwerty enhances the expressive potential of the traditional QWERTY keyboard by adding modalities characteristic of musical keyboards, a la MIDI. It collects data about the more subtle aspects of manual action that musical keyboards account for. It uses this data to drive text generation and phoneme generation in real time. Values for pressure and duration are captured and applied to different visual and acoustic parameters. Strength of keystroke, i.e. velocity, is mapped to character grayscale. Duration of key press, i.e. note length, is mapped to character size. These collected values are also used to control sound generation. Static or dynamic page presentation for digital concrete poetry. Live performance, real-time graphical score generation, with or without associated phoneme or other sound synthesis. Clinical application as an indicator of muscular control and coordination. Sensiqwerty is not a word processor. It is not intended for the production of text documents. Sensiqwerty is not a text-to-speech machine. We're not particularly interested in true speech synthesis. The bungling phoneme generation is understood as a kind of musical output. Sensiqwerty captures gesture, affect, and real-time dynamics, making the act of typing more than minimal binary data input. It permits the creation of a new genre of digital concrete poetry and offers potential for performance, including real-time graphical score generation. Computational systems traditionally ignore or prohibit affect. They are the epitome of Enlightenment rationalism. Sensiqwerty subverts this paradigm by acknowledging embodiment and affect and the significance of sensorimotoric capacities in cognition, especially affective cognition. As a demo or clinical tool, Sensiqwerty provides a representation of and collects data about a user's manual ability or debility. The project is premised on decades of building custom embodied interfaces, robotic and computational systems that attend to sensory motor subtleties of human embodied experience and performance. It is also based in extensive related theoretical research into embodied cognition and human-computer interaction.
Technical challenges and solutions. Some research has gone into the idea of incorporating more nuanced physical gestures into traditional QWERTY keyboards, but few commercial products or substantial artistic work has been produced so far. Analog keyboards with pressure-sensitive keys are currently popular in the gaming community. We attempted to adapt such a keyboard, but found technical limitations that prevented MIDI implementation of the Sensiqwerty project with it. In 2009, a team at Microsoft developed some experiments in this field, and in 2017 filed for a patent to add support for pressure and gestures to the virtual keyboard to make typing faster. We were looking for important physical aspects of typing that is not captured by the traditional digital keyboard. We want to capture more expressive input. It's important that we're able to grab immediate points of data, like the keystroke velocity and duration, but also that we could look at extended temporal or metadata, like typing speed, consistency versus inconsistency, regularity of pressure. Our early experiments with the Wooting 1 was unsuccessful because of the analog conversion rate. It was simply not fast enough to keep up with the typing speed. So we began searching for solutions in the context of musical applications. The Sensiqwerty is a tablet-sized pressure sensor with swappable interface overlays and is useful in easily generating data for control over digital programs. It was designed specifically for low-latency musical performance, so capturing high-speed physical input is very easily translated into MIDI or MIDI polyphonic expression data. The Sensiqwerty comes with a custom API mapping, so changing each ASCII key to a specific MIDI key value is quite easy. The QWERTY overlay makes it relatively straightforward to do so. Here's what the API looks like. You can see each ASCII key is instead changed to a MIDI note value. Once the MIDI data is sent out by the Sensiqwerty, we use Max to interpret the incoming MIDI data. MIDI polyphonic expression has standard support in Max, so the implementation and mapping is relatively straightforward. MIDI note events are used for velocity, and note value is converted back into ASCII values. Visual text generation is done with jitter. The mapping is modular and easily reconfigurable. We have the ability to track metadata as well, and longer temporal trends, like typing speed and consistency, looking at running averages. In addition to the visual text display, we also built a vocal sampler that acts as a generator of automated text-sound poetry. It functions like a rather traditional MIDI sampler, where each key is mapped to a single vocal sample. The result is an abstract sonic interpretation or representation of the text. The goal is to experiment in the artistic zone between speech and writing. This aspect of the project is intentionally limited. The sounds that we hear frequently do not match the words that we see. We have experimented with pitch and vocal inflection by using MIDI pitch bend data. For example, when the A key is pressed, it might sustain an ah sound, and if the user bends the finger to the right or left, it could vocally inflect upwards or downwards, like ah or ah. Some vocal sounds are not temporally extendable, like plosives. This creates space for sonic invention and rhythmic improvisation. Artistic modalities and applications. Sensiqwerty affords the user real-time dynamic input for expressive text generation. The software, written in Max, can automatically incorporate the timing of letter and line spacing. This embeds the real-time temporal input aspect of typing directly into the file. The user can then easily save a screenshot of the performance with a keystroke. This is an example of a concrete poem that was generated in real time using Sensiqwerty. Complex visual formatting is done at the input stage. There is no need to go back through later and edit the document. Sensiqwerty can be used to realize or perform concrete or sound poetry. It can record video and audio output for multimedia documentation. It is particularly useful as a tool for improvisation.
I sh R sh A D E O O F T E O E E G E E A O T A E A I E.
The following is an example of how Sensiqwerty could be used to realize or perform existing poetry.
Pa. I form. Po. Juniper. Sand. Ilandi. Ozard. Hanging.
We are hoping to compose medium-specific works for Sensiqwerty, in addition to using this technology for interpreting existing musical, performative, or poetic works. We are currently working on improving the real-time performative capabilities of the phoneme generator. In addition, we're experimenting with the concepts of audience interactivity, networked and telematic performance possibilities, particularly with Zoom, and more advanced animation using OpenGL for text generation.
This artist talk introduces the Global Urban Wilds Locative Media Project, a mobile app that orients the user to sensing the world in rural landscapes, or ecologies that spontaneously inhabit disturbed environments, and challenges binaries between the human and non-human. A work in progress to be launched in Montreal's Chaine3 in the fall of 2020, the Global Urban Wild app is an experimental and interactive GPS-enabled locative media experience with visual, audio, and haptic elements. This locative experience leverages the tension between the material and embodied experience of the Champ des Possibles, a protected green space established through citizen action in the high-density neighborhood of Montreal's Mile End, and the history of the land transformed by colonialism, industrialization, and immigration. The app engages users in stories of the global in the local, the emergence of this informal green space in the history of the neighborhood, the importance of urban biodiversity, as well as the slow violence that European settlement has inflicted on the land. Avoiding notions of eco-didacticism as well as eco-catastrophe, the project instead seeks to decenter or stretch the human and playfully encourage the user to engage with the champ as a heterotopia, a place with more layers of meaning and relationships to other places than immediately meets the eye. By storying otherwise, the Global Urban Wilds app emphasizes the entanglement of the human and the non-human in the urban wild, and acknowledges that the Champ des Possibles, like the city of Montreal, is located on unceded indigenous land of the Ganyan-Gahaga Nation. The Global Urban Wild app encourages site-specific transitive reading and sensing the world of the Champ des Possibles through movement and embodied perception mediated by the locative platform. You must be in the Champ to use this app. Touch the Map tab at the bottom of your screen to begin the walk from any location. The app's GPS-enabled interface allows users to navigate toward the collectibles associated with green bubbles on the map screen. An empty bird's nest is slowly overlaid with objects as the user moves through the space. Yves Desjardins and Justin Burr are two founders of Mile End Memories, a historical society focused on sharing the history of the neighborhood so that residents can be better informed and involved actors in their community. We met in the Champ one afternoon in the early summer to talk about the history of this land and its various uses over time. Justin explains the origins of the Quebec-Ottawa-Montreal Occidental Railway that passes along the top of the Champ.
So the railway project was part of the notion of colonization, of opening up new land for agriculture. In this particular case, they realized that there was also the possibility of bringing in firewood, which had been made.
Justin explains the vital role of railway technology for making territory accessible for colonialism.
Well, we're talking, remember the island of Montreal was a seigneury from the 17th century. The North Shore and into the Lower Laurentians was already divided up into seigneuries well before.
When touched by the user, the objects in the nest unlock content that includes interviews with community stakeholders, found sounds, as well as archival and site-specific visual art anchored in the material, botanical, historical, and sensory experience of dwelling and moving through the Champ. Marc Ambard, president of Les Amis du Champ des Possibles, talks about how the field can support urban biodiversity and help inspire the next generation of biologists. Marc explains how the Champ has become a magnet for people who are interested in creating the conditions for enhanced urban biodiversity.
But I think as people who go out looking at wild animals, whether it's birds or butterflies or dragonflies or even plants, those kind of people, whether they're biologists or just naturalists, see the value in these spots. And
the design of Global Urban Wilds has had, from the outset, an objective of defamiliarization. The imagined user of Global Urban Wilds is a distracted one. They live in an urban region that imagines itself as a smart city. In that framework, computing is ubiquitous, and they encounter spaces such as the Champ, not as a space of dwelling, but as a space of passage, always on the way to something else. Spaces of passage and commuting could be called familiar in their unextraordinary quality. To the unassuming or the pedestrian on their way, the Champ presents itself as a shortcut to the metro station. The objective of the Global Urban Wild project has therefore been to draw attention to the unseen, in which the Champ as a heterotopic site within the city may be examined for how it foregrounds questions of ecological and environmental sustainability, as well as what it might mean for human visitors to dwell in the Champ in a decentered and decolonial mode. Framed by 60s-era industrial buildings that once housed the city's garment industry, the Canadian Pacific Railway tracks, and the walled garden of the Carmelite Monastery of the Plateau Montréal, the Champ des Possibles is an ideal setting from which to explore the affordances of site-specific locative narratives concerned with the complex interaction between nature and culture in the environment. The conceptualization and development of the Global Urban Wilds app has required multiple steps and a team-based approach. Storyboarding the platform functions and content. Artwork development and animation. Workshopping and playtesting app concepts, functions, and design. Sound recordings and multiple interviews with artists and community stakeholders. Researching and curating the app content. And finally, designing and adapting the app platform for use in the Champ des Possibles. I hope this presentation has given you some idea of what it might be like to navigate the Champ des Possibles with the Global Urban Wilds app in hand. We look forward to feedback on how the app might enhance your sensory engagement and what new impressions you might take away from the Champ when you visit. Please join us for the launch this fall.
Divergent Design Lab, Towards Invisibility and Social Engineering.
Reality is malleable. Divergent Design Lab is involved with experiments that test the bounds of reality. In our recent work, we found that small changes to language between two people can affect their perception of reality. Reality is malleable.
Design can shape reality, and designers and technologists are responsible for doing so ethically. Divergent Design Lab considers identity, privacy, and security from an interdisciplinary and intersectional perspective. We investigate vulnerability and exploitation, new media art, user experience design, and social psychology paradigms. In this paper we argue, drawing from the perspectives of cybersecurity and social psychology, that internet-based manipulation of an individual or group reality is possible using only software and changing words in a web browser. We call this attack ambient tactical deception. Ambient, in artificial intelligence, describes software that is unobtrusive and completely integrated into a user's life. Tactical deception is an information warfare term for the use of deception on an opposing force. We suggest that an ATD attack could change the sentiment of text in a web browser. This could alter the victim's perception of reality by providing disinformation. Within the limit of online communication, even a pause in replying to a text can affect how people perceive each other. The outcomes of an ATD attack could include alienation, upsetting a victim, and influencing their feelings about an election, a spouse, or a corporation.
In a successful ambient tactical deception attack, the attacker changes reality for the target by making small changes to emotionally effective words. The target may be led to believe that their boss, spouse, or friend no longer respects them. Divergent Design Lab believes that these attacks could be automated to disrupt organizations of any sort. In 2017, Paige, Treebridge, and Westbrook created a language project called Sorry. Our browser plugin added the word sorry to social media statements so people seemed more apologetic.
Sorry is a Firefox and Chrome extension that uses regular expressions in JavaScript to find I statements and add the word sorry to them. The sorry prototype finds phrases like I am looking for, I'm done with this, and I don't agree and inserts the word sorry. Those statements become sorry, I am looking for, sorry, I'm done with this, and sorry, I don't agree. The sorry prototype was originally intended to soften an increasingly polarized social media landscape. The sorry browser extension was the basis for the concept of ambient tactical deception, developed by Divergent Design Lab in the area of cybersecurity. Sorry introduced us to the idea that small changes in language, automated by computer, could change how people perceive one another. In our paper about these projects, we concluded by suggesting that positive applications of this approach were possible.
Divergent Design Lab is growing. This fall, Divergent Design Lab is launching Flourish, an exploratory project by Paige Treebridge. When we change our outlook, we often change the way we speak about things. Flourish is working on prototypes of reality-repairing language. Flourish uses automated, computer-controlled changes to linguistic politeness in order to make people feel better.
You are intelligent. You are a hard worker. You are a great listener. You are important. You are capable of achieving your greatest potential. You accept yourself as you are. You are whole and complete. You are one of the first to ever know you are alive. You are present. You are loved. You are exceptional. You are a part of the very fabric of humanity. You believe in all possibilities. You embrace your flaws fully and completely. You are passionate and open to all possibilities. You believe that the future holds incredible possibilities. You are guided by your intuition. You seek understanding from the stars. You are powerful. You can lift mountains to achieve amazing dreams. You are strong. You are love. Your light can't fail to spread into people. You shine bright like fire. You are a light in darkness. You are the light in the darkest hour of your life. And in this darkness you can be seen. You shine like a beacon in a sea of shadows.
We believe language is a vital component of human-computer interaction. Flourish is oriented towards positive, supportive environments for online education. Divergent Design Lab is investigating emerging educational experiences. Our open-source pedagogical model for cybersecurity education was supported by the United States National Security Agency.
Divergent Design Lab investigates vulnerability and social psychology paradigms as they relate to creativity and critical technical practice. Our pedagogical research includes work in vulnerability and privacy, creative instigation, security and user experience, and cross-disciplinary approaches. Divergent Design Lab was founded as a queer research lab by Westbrook and Paige Treebridge in 2016. In 2017, the lab grew to include Dr. Filippo Sharevsky. Divergent Design Lab is located in the College of Computing and Digital Media at DePaul University in Chicago, Illinois. Jessica Westbrook uses art, design, and research to negotiate and organize the joys and struggles of information and understanding. She is interested in invisible design, complexity, contradictions, sociopolitics, values, dissent, and learning. Paige Treebridge is a US-based artist, designer, and experienced design researcher who focuses on social interaction online, particularly emergent AI/ML approaches. Her research in cybersecurity and HCI, creating the concept of ambient tactical deception and developing it with Divergent Design Lab, led to her current research directions. Filippo Sharevsky, PhD, is a cybersecurity researcher who constructs and manipulates reality as it unfolds across the cyber-physical spaces and within power structures, particularly focused on social engineering, reality interventions, resistances, and cyber warfare.
Reality is malleable.
You're muted. You're muted. That's better.
Thank you. So, thank you everyone for these great communications. My name is Louis-Philipe Rondeau. I'm a professor at the NAD Digital Arts, Animation and Design School of the Université du Québec, Chicoutimi, and I'm also a digital artist. I'd like to take some time to introduce one another. So maybe we could start with Linda.
Okay, yeah, I introduced me in the beginning of the video, but yeah, I'm Linda Kronman. I'm based in Bergen, in Norway, currently, and here I'm doing a PhD in a ERC-funded project called Machine Vision in Everyday Life. And my part of the project is to look at how machine vision is represented in digital art. And besides that, I'm also a practicing artist, working together with Andreas Zingele under the collective name of Kairos.
Thank you, Linda. Simon?
Yeah, hello everybody. Simon Penny. I'm a professor officially in electronic art and design at UCI, also in music and also informatics. And I've been working on a custom embodied interactive systems for most of my career. The project that I worked on with Alex emerges from work I've done in embodied cognition and related issues relating to HCI. I'll hand over to Alex now.
Hi, my name is Alex Lough. I'm finishing up my PhD at UC Irvine in the Integrated Composition, Improvisation, and Technology program. I'm a musician and sound artist. I do a lot of work performing with electronics, so I design my own custom hardware, electronic systems, software to perform with, and primarily work with a lot of improvisation.
Okay, let's hand this off to Jill.
Hi, my name's Jill Didur, and I'm a faculty at Concordia University, and my project, Global Urban Wilds, I've been developing at the TAG Research Center at the Milia Institute. This is the second locative media project I've worked on. I have another one on the iTunes App Store, Alpine Garden Biscayne. And these research creation projects are part of a larger grant looking at the affordances of locative media for telling stories about the environment and engaging citizen publics around those things. And I'll hand it off to Tony.
Tony, yes.
Hi, I'm Tony Higuchi. I'm a PhD student at Concordia University. I'm also working at the TAG Research Center. I mainly work with conversational agents. I'm starting to investigate the use of conversational agents in playful interactivity.
Thank you, Tony. And Paige?
Yes, I'm Paige Treebridge with Divergent Design Lab, assistant professor at DePaul University. In the lab, I kind of act as the bridge between, really divergent creative work coming from new media art and cybersecurity, somewhere in the middle in HCI and cognitive linguistics.
Thank you, Paige. So in the chat, we have a question from Ben Bogart, and it's a two-part question. Is bias only manifest in training data, not in training themselves? I guess this is a question for Linda Kronman. And the second part is, of course, it's not only the behavior, but also who does it that may be suspicious. What do you think?
Yeah, so of course, like, I think that the bias is not just coming from the training sets, but it is a part that shapes specifically machine vision. And I think it's all the meaning making that goes into the different levels of building an AI. And in this case, of course, I talk about narrow AI. And when we are talking about like machine vision in everyday life, like technologies like facial recognition or action detection. So a lot of artists have been working with how, like what bias looks like when machines look at humans, and especially faces. And for us, it's been like interesting to then, inspired from these works, to start exploring the training sets of like behavior, because this is in a similar way as facial recognition, or these technologies are like presented to us as neutral, also like behave like to detect suspicious behavior is said to kind of bypass the racial profiling, but we are not so convinced about that. So it's of course also like a lot about, it's about the training set, it's about how these technologies are applied. It's also like what kind of algorithms or machine learning models are chosen. So it's a lot of things that come together, but I've been especially focusing and interested in like how we classify and how we collect what the data is when we train machines.
Thank you, Linda. I've got a question. I've got a few questions myself. Maybe my first one is for Simon and Alex. And I really enjoyed that you're trying to involve the creating aspect in the corporeality of typing. Does your work have the potential of restoring a kind of orality that is lost to digital prose?
I certainly think so. Having worked with it now, so this is the typing interface. What I notice is when I'm working with it, I become extremely aware of certain fingers that get a lot more weight, or the actual like rhythm into my typing. And it's little things like you just never really consider, like this finger is much stronger than this finger, or that your thumb on the space bar is like the strongest. So really thinking about like how typing can be a very musically expressive kind of act. And I think by working with it more, it's one of those things that I just become very aware of and very sensitive. And I notice I do it on my normal QWERTY keyboards on my laptop now.
Yeah, so if I can cut in there, thanks for that question. And you know, this is for me. This was one of a series of works that is a kind of derisive joke in a way that points up the de-skilling of a lot of computer interfaces. So you know, one of the kind of theoretical angles that I've had on HCI, you know, in my work for 30 years, I guess now, is that in order to achieve so-called user-friendliness and intuitiveness, the cost is very often a de-skilling of the capabilities. I mean, when we think about the sensory motor subtleties of handwriting versus the simplification of typing text, and even with a mechanical typewriter, of course, you get some variance in the mark that's made because the muscular intensity of the gestures is communicated in some way onto the old manual typewriter. But with the digital interfaces, there's a certain market pressure to dumb them down effectively. And so what we noticed was that, and what I noticed in my own teaching is that students are beginning to manifest a reduction of sensory motor capability and subtlety. And I'm actually giving a paper on this subject on Thursday if anyone's interested. But so we took the QWERTY keyboard as an example and compared it, for instance, with a musical keyboard. So if you're a musician learning to play piano, the tuning of the sensory motor subtleties of your capabilities is absolutely central to learning the piano. Whereas with the QWERTY keyboard, you bang that key, you bang it hard, you bang it soft, you bang it long, you bang it short, you get a lowercase k. So that's really, in one way, what the app was sort of drawing out. But on the other hand, we see it as a way to enhance the expressive potential of the QWERTY keyboard by bringing back in some of those sensory motor subtleties of the musical keyboard.
Very interesting. My next question is for Jill and Tony, and I really enjoyed the idea of having an app to get people to recognize their surroundings and to connect with their surroundings. But I'm sure that some people must have pointed out that there's how do you reconcile the irony that you propose a smartphone app to entice the public to connect to the environment?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So we've thought about this quite a bit because the kind of locative interfaces I'm most interested in are set in green spaces. And one of the interesting things about the location of the urban wild that is featured in the artist talk is that it actually is located right in the sort of heart of the one of the gaming industry locations in Montreal. So we have Ubisoft, basically overlooking the Champ des Possibles. It's also, as I suggested in the video, it's a midway point between the metro station and getting to some of those places of employment. So a lot of, and it is a space, a lot of the sort of desire lines that you see in the landscape of the location are partly from people commuting between that metro station across the tracks to their employment. So in some ways, one of the key users of the app that we had in mind were those very digitally adept tech industry, game industry workers who cut through that space on a regular basis. There is, of course, all kinds of people in the neighborhood who use it for dog walking and picnics. There's a daycare activities there. So the idea that the smartphone is kind of foreign to those spaces, I think is changing, and is certainly not the case in relation to this urban wild. I don't know if that gets at your question.
No, interesting. Yes, it does. Tony, do you have anything to add?
Yes, if I may add, I also believe it's a very interesting question because one would think that, there's this kind of like a dichotomy between like the digital device and the actual like real space, but at the same time, I think that we can actually use this project to highlight how can we connect the people to the space using the device itself, right? And so there's really there isn't such a clear division.
Thank you. So I also have a question for Paige, and I was very startled by your presentation, and the big question I have is, does manipulating reality have the potential to ease society's issues? such as polarization and division? Or in the end, will this erode confidence in media and institutions?
I kind of moved my part of the research away from cybersecurity because of the disturbing part of it. We created a really very art piece in creating the sorry piece. It just makes people say they're sorry. It's something that Jess Westbrook wanted to do, and I kind of made that happen with code. And then we turned it into a cybersecurity attack concept that was far too real. It's really like way more wild than what you see there. It comes from the research of John C. Lilly, the guy who tried to teach dolphins to talk. And so the idea comes from like metaprogramming in the human biocomputer. So like, can you program people's brains? And what we found is that it doesn't seem like it would be that hard to just change linguistic politeness and make people alienated from each other. And the more I went down that road, the more disturbing it became. And so I think the answer to your question is yes. I think if we look at changing linguistic politeness and just alienating people, then why can't we create computationally linguistic counter algorithms to something like Twitter? Twitter is an aggressive platform. It encourages aggressive behavior. It encourages hate speech just blatantly and does nothing about it. So what I'm working on right now with my research assistant, Audrey Lee, who's really amazing, undergrad student, but just amazing. We're working on whether we can support people before they start posting or as they're posting into social media platforms, or even something like journaling and Evernote, in ways that will affirm their identity. We're specifically looking at like intersexual population who, feel uncomfortable or attacked online. Can we make it a safer space for them? And it's really early stage, but I think we can. I think if Facebook has already published a paper completely unethically that depressed people by reducing the number of positive posts in people's feed. And if they can do that, then why can't we do the opposite?
Well, I think this is very interesting, and this is a subject that really touches me. The thing I'm wondering is if you're trying to manipulate people's feeds, and the people who send the messages realize that their communications are being manipulated, isn't that going to make people complain that they're being censored? That
yes,
it's
absolutely.
going to create an uproar, and it might have the opposite effect.
Yeah, what we proposed is what's known in cybersecurity as a man-in-the-middle attack, that if you got between the person and the source, that you could do this. But what we're talking about now is opt-in ambience, where it's going to be more positive than it actually is, but you may not be able to tell exactly when and where. What I don't know about that, and that's where we're going to be in prototyping in the winter, is do you mind? Do you mind if everything seems a little bit better than it is? And I would say in 2020, 2021, maybe not.
Yeah. That's very interesting. I've got a few follow-up questions, but maybe we'll get back to it. I was wondering, I have a question for Linda. And you mentioned using click work for people to spot suspicious behavior. Does your work seek to point out the dehumanizing effects of click work?
Yes, both like kind of the situation of click workers, of course, and like there is the inequalities in these layers of building AI, and even if they are like an important part, of course, they are not getting fair paid. And Caroline Cinder's project is much about that, where you can actually a lot of supervised and semi-supervised machine learning can't avoid using click workers. So she's kind of like made this useful artwork where you can at least calculate a fair wage for the people, and this is going in the same direction. Also, we talk about that, but it's both about the click workers and the meaning making, but it's also about like the data sets and how data sets are collected, how they are used, how we make meaning out of them, how like I argue in a paper that I wrote, intuition machines, that we are like externalizing our intuitions, and those biases are of course like externalized with us, and with the human, like kind of touch, the human labor that is involved in building AI.
So if I understand what you're saying, we're offsetting our own judgment and putting it in the hands of AI. So it's a form of intellectual laziness.
I don't think it's laziness. I mean, I think we can also, like, I mean, bias can also, we can also build in positive bias. So we could think of how we could build these systems in ways that would actually like balance like power structures. And that's why I've been like kind of interested in this looking into these feminist AI projects. Because they are actually trying to balance that power imbalance, that how technology is now designed, and how we can like develop tools that are balancing, would balance that situation.
Interesting. So trying to counterbalance the biases of AI.
I mean, AI will always be biased, so we have to like kind of decide in which way it will be biased. Like what kind of intuitions are we building into them?
I think it's just underlining in big red letters the fact that technologies are not neutral. So, but yes, so I think we can get back to that. I've got a question for Simon and Alex. So when using your device, did you notice that it changed your behavior when you were typing? Did you want to perform for, you know, like, for example, they say that some writers have changed their style when going from handwritten notes to using a typewriter. Did it change not only the how you type, but what you typed?
It certainly changed how I type. I mean, again, it's just even thinking. I mean, you can literally see on the screen, like, okay, wow, I actually hover, I hold on this key a little bit longer, or my right hand is like substantially more dominant than my left, or even this finger is substantially more dominant than another finger. So I became very sort of acutely aware of like thinking about it again, like a musical keyboard, and the sensitivity to how I'm doing that. And in some ways it might be compensating or leaning into it. And it's nice because if I'm, performing with like a vocalist or something, I can, obviously dynamically kind of make things bigger or smaller and create shape. As to what I type, I don't think the content has changed, but I noticed, so one of the things I kind of deliberately wanted to incorporate some aspects of the typewriter. One of the things is I don't want anything to be deleted. So once it's out there, it's out there. You can't really fix mistakes. And part of that is I noticed how it makes me so much more deliberate in how I type. And I notice I was very casual about like spelling mistakes. Whenever I go back, oh, I'll fix them later. And yeah, that was one of those things that I realized, as Simon talks about, sort of de-skilling the user. Why aren't I more careful about that at the input stage? It seems like, cognitively that there's actually more thought about being very deliberate, being very careful about the words that I choose. But I don't know if it's necessarily changed the content per se.
Yeah, I think, the only thing I would add to that is that somehow, we've attempted to make a machine, which someone mentioned earlier, kind of stands in between the sort of automated machine modality of word processor text writing and speech itself. So, as we speak publicly, we take care to enunciate clearly, to emphasize in the right places. We learn to do that as public speakers, and in a way, Sensiqwerty enforces that kind of real-time awareness in the act of typing.
I just wanted to ask a question, or just say that I really enjoyed all the different presentations, and the Sensiqwerty keyboard does recall for me, some of the studies in literary scholarship on how typewriters have shaped writers' practice, and I like the way the Sensiqwerty could in a more common usage with writers, digital born manuscripts could kind of capture something about the thinking of the writer, the emphasis that the writer would place on choosing certain words, some of the kind of information you could get from a typewritten manuscript, as you were saying in response to that earlier question. So I think it sounds like an amazing project. And then I also wanted to mention with Paige's reality repairing language that I think it's as a Canadian, it's very funny to see a software that would, insert sorry so many times into my text, because of course Canadians are known for being overly polite and apologetic for various things. But I also wondered, as a woman writing, I often find I have to remind myself to be more assertive in terms of the use of language. And I'm wondering if you thought about those kinds of situations when you were designing your project.
The project is based on a project called Jailbreak the Patriarchy. I don't have the name in front of me because I didn't expect it to come up, but yeah, there was lots of issues in that project itself. So there's definitely a gendered language that we haven't explored at all, really. And I don't really have a response for it so much as I really wasn't comfortable. I'm not comfortable with Jailbreak the Patriarchy as Jailbreak the Patriarchy just quickly is that it goes back and changes people's pronouns and gendered terms for them in reverse of what they are on the screen. And it's a very problematic project to begin with. But I wasn't really comfortable with even sorry or what we were doing, except for the fact that it is like very experimental, prototypical new media art. So I'm comfortable with it as that, but I would not be comfortable with changing what people say and how it seems to other people, and that's how it became a cybersecurity project. So I agree. I think one of the statements there is my friend Thomasina talking about how she's going back into college, and it makes her apologetic, and that's really creepy that she's apologizing for going back to college. So yeah, we're dealing with some very weird things that happen. And really, my part of it as a person in HCI, UXD, and human-centered design is really looking at, like, isn't this bizarre that we live in a time where what we say can be actively changed? People are obsessed with making it look like Barack Obama is saying something that he's not with these deep fakes. But what we did is go the opposite direction, back to just pure language and the fact that you can change it very easily on any of these platforms at any point. So yeah, even the just saying sorry is creepy.
Could I cut in there and just say, once again, I would like to say this has been a fascinating panel, and it's been a real pleasure to hear everybody's work. I have a quick response to Paige, and which touches on what you just said, is I know that there's a kind of counter trend to sorry, even in sort of activist browser extensions, which one of them I think is called something like "How to Stop Saying Sorry." Are you familiar with that? And what's your take on those two kind of activist trends? It'd be kind of interesting to see the two things duking it out. Anyway, go ahead.
Ultimately, the goal and what we're describing this as is sort of a linguistic interruption as part of a personal digital assistant, somebody who could help you in expressing yourself, in feeling positive about how you express yourself, which, like I said, this is really early stage, so we could do literally anything. We're trying to find the most meaningful and impactful places I'm not a huge fan of interventions that tell women how to speak and how to be better at speaking. I'm more, if anything, I would like an app that helps dudes to stop making comments like that or having opinions on how women should speak. But yeah, this is all open right now, and I'm really excited that we're at this stage of creating something that's very different than what social media is trying to do.
I also just want to very briefly respond to Jill's comment, which I think is related again to this sort of the way that text is represented in digital media. One aspect of the project that I didn't really get to show in the presentation, or one feature, I guess, is having space be represented by time. So normally, with text documents, it's just a completed thing, and you type, and when you wait, nothing happens. But one thing I was experimenting with is basically having it continue to scroll if you're not doing anything. So this sense of how much time did somebody really spend on those 140 characters might be very interesting if it was represented or spatially, right? Where you have a couple of words and then you see a very large gap before their next thought, and sort of seeing where that sort of input is and where that attention is, and sort of thinking about what kind of language you're using and what kind of things you're typing.
That's interesting. It's a question I actually wanted to ask you. Have you, Simon and Alex, considered the negative space? So that the time where you're not typing to reflect itself onto the page. That those hesitations usually mean a lot more than what's actually being written on social media.
Yeah, I mean, so exactly like what I just said, incorporating just blank space as time that you weren't doing anything, but then also something that I experimented with, which you could see a little bit in the demo, when I was typing hard, those letters stayed on the screen for longer, and when I typed softly, they kind of disappeared. And the idea of, again, like with speech, once it's said, it's sort of gone, right? And then the farther away it is in time, the sort of more gone it is. And so thinking about representing text that way, especially digitally, is very interesting, because once things are sort of put on the internet, it's very permanent. And so thinking about digital tools where it works kind of similarly to speech, right? So you can see it and it's in your memory, but then it fades and kind of disappears. So yeah, we have explored a little bit with that. And I would be very curious to try to figure out how to integrate it into some sort of browser or to get this, like that.
Yeah. And I should cut in and say one of the conversations that we had, and this is a work in progress, has to do with avoiding the left to right, top to bottom conventions of writing. So having the speech emerge in the middle of the field, so that the utterance, which is now, is always in the center of the screen, was a sort of another of those ideas that we've been kicking around. I think we need to move to a somewhat more sophisticated kind of real-time text graphics representational system to get at some of these things a little more. But you're absolutely right. It's a kind of temporal representation of speech. So there's something. I think that's all I wanted to say.
We have a couple questions in the public chat. The first one from Ernest Edmonds is, I was interested in how concrete poetry has been moved on. Is this a new direction that we can expect or hope? Might it grow? So if I understand correctly, concrete poetry is poetry where you actually design the words on the page. Is there something that you're looking to expand to?
Oh, sure. We think we've invented a new medium for, or a kind of a context for a new genre of sort of expression that's somewhere between performative poetry and text, sort of real-time text writing. We refer to it in shorthand as digital concrete poetry. So yes, Edmund's right. I think we'd be very interested in seeing that aspect of the software explored, by ourselves and other people.
Okay, and the follow-up question is, what about text in game? Have you considered that?
Meaning.
Well, my interpretation is when you're gaming, when you're playing a game, people tend to chat, and sometimes it's hard to convey emotion by using a very terse and short language. So have you maybe considered the broader aspect of communicating to somebody, but being able to have a bigger expressive register?
Yeah, I mean, I think one way, I haven't really thought about it in terms of gaming per se, but I think one thing that we are trying to explore as soon as we can get more people using it would be kind of like Zoom and thinking about like kind of harkening back to like instant messaging and thinking about it as like a slightly more lively way of dealing with that kind of textual back and forth, especially because there's been this whole like up and down with, you know, how formal email started and how email has gotten even less formal now, and texting is so informal. And it's interesting, like the little things like now, you know, like Facebook or text messages, they have this person is typing, and so you know that they're doing something, you know that they're thinking, but you don't really see what's going on. So yeah, maybe we would like to experiment more with that as just a purely more expressive communication tool.
Oh, interesting. Now, I've got a question for Jill and Tony. In your presentation, you talk about defamiliarization with the environment. You use that word. Could you just broaden that idea a little bit?
Yes. One of the things about the urban wild that I was most interested in when I started thinking about the project was how the community that actually mobilized to protect the green space was thinking about its value to them. And the emergence, the fact that it became a protected green space is because the city was thinking about turning what was a former train yard that had where the nature had sort of taken back the space in different ways, was going to be turned into a truck depot. And you know, as I tried to sort of hint at in my video presentation, you know, in Canada, we're going through a big process of decolonization and reconciliation with First Nations communities. And the sort of romantic pastoral notions associated with green spaces and certain ideas about, you know, what is environmentalism are terms that in my sort of more conventional scholarly research I'm interested in unpacking. So in addition to, you know, asking you know, people who pass through the space for commuting on a regular basis to kind of pause and think about the history of that space, the other audience I was interested in was you know, the ones that sort of came to the space for recreation or you know, escape from you know, the high density living conditions that we have in Montreal with, you know, narrow streets and multiplex units all surrounding the area. So defamiliarizing the space was, you know, try to get beyond romantic notions of the environment for that sort of second group of users, and think about, like, what does it mean to you know, mobilize to protect a space? What is our, you know, to think a bit more critically about what is our relationship to this landscape, and yeah, and what it would mean to decolonize that relationship further.
That's interesting. I really like the formula, the urban wild, which sounds paradoxical, but actually isn't. So that's very interesting to me. Decolonizing space is quite an interesting concept too, which I think is worthwhile investigating. I have a question for Linda, and maybe it's not a very specific question, but actually, it's I've looked at your video twice now, and I'm really wondering, are we heading towards a paranoid dystopia? Do you think totalitarian states will take over AI as a means to have systematic surveillance on their people?
I think we are systematically surveilled already on many levels, both by states and corporations. And I think, like, when I've been looking at the artworks that deal with these issues, it's definitely like you get a dystopian kind of feel. But on the other hand, I kind of found hope in these feminist AI projects where like they are putting out strategies of thinking how we can do this from like community level, and these tools can, like the surveillance tools are of course also used for watching back on people in power or on power, like institutions of power on states. So I think like the forensic architecture or works from for example Adam Harvey, V-Frame, they use these same technologies and kind of subvert that use on by using it to like kind of find evidence for human rights. So I think it's more like a conversation we have to have is how we use these tools and how we like, yeah, I mean, writers who have been writing about oppressive algorithms talk about that this is like a human rights struggle.
Mm-hmm. So you're thinking that these tools might, on the other hand, be used by citizens to do what Steve Mann calls surveillance. So looking at the power structures from the point of view of the citizens.
But maybe there's even a step further to go, like to build, like thinking about like building and designing and what are the like the design tools. The design justice movement is like advocating for like totally rethinking our design tools from based on like feminist theory. So that's where I see a glimpse of hope.
So Simon, you have a question?
Yeah, well, it's not so much a question, it's just part of the conversation. You know, I think it's very interesting to look at the long history of artificial intelligence, which is something that I've done, and in particular try and understand what is consistent and what's novel about the contemporary connectionist machine learning styles of AI with respect to the first generation symbolic AI approaches. I think that's a very interesting critical project, and I think one of the things that is consistent with any technical analysis, in fact, is, and this was the thing that killed first generation symbolic AI, is that any rule-based representational system is by its very nature going to be a simplification. A model must always be a simplification, and there are always border conditions and things that are left outside, or criteria that are not considered. So philosophically, you know, there's an angle on this which says, well, no, it will never. That's assuming that human perception is just and complete, which of course is also not true. But these are rule-based systems, and they they will always impose, by their nature, a sort of standardized judgment, and whether becoming increasingly precise and subtle in those rule-based judgments is actually an advance is an open question, I think.
Yeah, but it's also like it's about like the design. Who is the designer? Who has the right to say what is just?
Sure.
Yeah. I also want to say that I don't know if it's banal, but it seems like one of the impulses that links all of our projects is whether we actually do that effectively or not. I think Simon's questioning is to try and push back against the anonymity and anchor our usage and development of the tool, the digital tools and the digital interface in a particular time and space and location, because I think all those factors are influencing, are part of the rules that are being chosen in more kind of commercially distributed things, and rather than pretending they're not there, we're like saying, well, we want to substitute some other ones, though it's more of an art house kind of boutique effort. But that maybe the demand for that is now. I don't know.
I've got a question for Paige, actually, and you talk a lot about manipulating reality, which is something that I find is very interesting. And William James quotes, "Reality means simply relation to our emotional and active life. Whatever excites and stimulates our interest is real." So maybe by extension, we could say that online, the online world is actually an extension of reality, or it's the reality that currently stimulates our interest. Maybe this is a little philosophical question, but do you feel the concept of reality itself is disintegrating with digital life? Is there such a thing as an objective reality when we're talking about cyberspace?
Absolutely not. I'm seriously questioning whether, when removed from observer bias, people read the same things when they read a page of text. I wonder whether that's happening, and definitely in 2020, in online communication between, literal fucking Nazis and people who are just trying to say hi to each other. There is a warped perspective, and there is a warping of reality that's happening. There's a book that I would highly suggest people read to understand a little bit more about what's going on, called Like War, that documents how Twitter was used in for example, ISIS taking over Mosul by showing certain things, and by broadcasting a message, they overcame a force that was about 3 times stronger than the force that could have defended the city, just by using propaganda. And none of this is new. We know this. We know how information warfare works. What we don't know is how machine learning plus artificial intelligence, the sort of thing that Linda's talking about, when you're able to take that power and warp reality. I mean, Russia did this. We know this in 2016 in the United States election. This happened. So absolutely, for me, William James is not so much relevant as Sarah Ahmed and queer phenomenology talking about the idea of being disoriented online. Like, what does it mean to be disoriented from a reality that's normative? I think we've gone from a reality that's normative, that queer people need to orient ourselves to a reality where it's actively being constantly moved. The goalposts, so to speak, are constantly being moved, and we don't know what's real and what's not. Does Donald Trump have COVID? I don't know, and that really bothers me.
So this, looking at a kind of history of media, I'm fascinated to hear what you're saying, Paige, and of course, one of the characteristics which distinguishes the kind of media we have from the kind of patriarchal broadcast mass media of the previous generation is that it is so plural. Do you have some reflection on whether this whether this lack of clarity about what comprises truth or fact is in fact a result, and maybe not a negative result, of the pluralization of media on the internet.
I think everything that was hopeful about the internet is trash. I remember reading Mondo 2000 and thinking that there was some possibility, but it's the same patriarchal system, and cis straight people murdered Alan Turing. So, I mean, we need to start with that. Where did we go wrong? We went wrong at the beginning, and we are still not at the beginning of a feminist queer intersectional computing. And, you know, Race After Technology, that book that I believe Linda showed, I mean, you just look in there and it's hideous. It's hideous what's happening. And I think rather than thinking about like, oh, what do we have now? How is it going? Instead, we should be talking about how do we start over? How do we burn this to the ground before it gets any worse?
Right.
So in your opinion, the internet and the entire problems that are arising from it it's not fixable. We need to develop parallel infrastructure that is based on understanding.
At minimal, we need to talk about the sort of interventions that Linda is highlighting. Like, how do we intervene and just to create some space for thinking and being, and then decide where to go next.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. But there's also the fact of the matter is that power will exercise power by whatever means are available. And in the 19th century, it was control of the telegraph and control of newspapers. That was, you know, equally information warfare. So I think that, you know, this is a long-standing battle, right?
Interesting. I think we only have 1 minute left, actually, but this is a very interesting conversation, very enlightening, and I think we could go on for a long time. But considering that we don't have much time, I'd like to thank you all for this very interesting discussion and your great projects, which I found very enlightening. So thank you very much. And we've got about 30 seconds left. So in the meantime, anybody have any closing words?
Well, thank you for being a great chair.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. And yeah, so Jill says, I think QWERTY project could be a very fun creative writing workshop tool. I completely agree. I would love to try it myself.
Well, you're very welcome, of course, and we'd love to communicate with you online and make it available.
Yeah.
Thank you. So we will see you around in the symposium, and I think we're just about out of time.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.